Hello everyone, my name is Protesilaos, also known as Prot. Today is Sunday, the 2nd of June 2024. It is midday and I am sitting under the shade of a tree. I am taking a break from the work that I have been doing around the hut, where I have been clearing the land from wild vegetation. I am doing this because once the grass dries out, it poses a fire hazard, and as we are approaching the summer months, the risk is higher, and I don't want to take any risk whatsoever. But I am not here to provide you with a status update on the hut project, rather, I am here to do some philosophy. I want to talk about masculinity and related themes. This is not a video of the sort where a man offers advice to other men. Rather, I want us to be more considerate in our actions, to understand that we are not operating in a vacuum and that when we are doing something, it has an impact on other people. So we have to be considerate. That's the one thing. And the other thing, which is consistent with that, is that we want to recognize or perhaps to appreciate the diversity of the human condition. So, even when I will be talking about masculinity, I am not really limiting the audience to men. This is gender agnostic. Anybody can listen or watch this. Let me then start with an ancient Greek story. The Trojan War. This is a work of art, a work of fiction by Homer or Omiros in modern Greek. The story involves gods, demigods, and humans in a battle for the ages. Of course, there are snippets of realism in the story, but fundamentally it is a work of fiction. The story is about the war, but it also is about describing parts of the human psyche, aspects of the human psyche, patterns in the behavior of people that we all are aware of, that we observe out there. And what the artist is doing, what Homer is doing, is that he observes those patterns in human behavior and abstracts them away from the particularities and gives them a name, gives them a personality, turns them into a human, into a character. And in doing that, Homer allows us, helps us, the audience, to connect with those insights, to understand them better, to personalize them. And now they have staying power, they have mnemonic value. We remember them. We think of the hero, and in the image of the hero, in the symbol of that hero, we have the character and we have all those traits that go with it. One such character, one such archetype, is that of Achilles, in modern Greek, Achilles. Achilles is the Greek champion. He is a demigod, meaning that one of his parents is a god, the other is human. He is still a mortal, but he has godly powers, godly traits. And his power is that he is the greatest warrior that Greece, the Greek world, has ever seen. He is invincible. Nobody can defeat him. He is simply the best of the best. There is this scene where Achilles is fighting in one-to-one combat the commander of the opposing force, Hector, or Ektoras in modern Greek. And as everybody would expect from an invincible champion, a demigod, Achilles wins the fight. There was this custom in the Trojan War where the dead body, they would allow the opposing force to retrieve the dead body and to give it all the respects to the dead person, to give them the respects and to have the person's family there and all that. And this is a custom that everybody is observing. But Achilles in this scene does not. So once Achilles kills Hector, Instead of allowing Hector's comrades to retrieve the body, he ties the body onto his chariot, and he desecrates the body by parading it across the battlefield. And this act of insolence is central to the character of Achilles, because even though he is gifted, even though he is exceptionally talented, even though he is the greatest warrior there has ever been, he is inconsiderate. He doesn't care about others. He is an egocentric kind of figure. In the Greek tradition, one of the central themes is that of hubris, and the other side of hubris, what rather we try to learn by talking about hubris, is we try to understand moderation, doing things moderately, not going towards extremes, understanding our limits. So hubris is the limits imposed upon the human condition, and not the limits, is rather the transgression of the limits imposed upon the human condition. So it is that kind of cockiness, that kind of arrogance, where the person does not want to accept their humanity, their mortality, their limits. And in the works of art, the limits are, of course, imposed by the gods, but we can just say that they are imposed by our nature. And that if we overdo it, we will harm ourselves. And this is something we can see very easily, like if you train too much, if you do too much weightlifting, your muscles will get injured, just like that. And so if you are not understanding, if you are not recognizing your limits, you are harming yourself. And if you do that to the extreme, you are killing yourself. In the works of art, the justice, the delivery of justice, that when someone commits hubris, always comes from divine intervention. It is always the work of some god or goddess. And in the case of Achilles, this is exactly what is happening. So Achilles did not recognize that he is part of a social milieu. He did not recognize that his actions affect others as well. And he did not recognize that even though he is the best of the best when it comes to fighting, when it comes to warfare, he is still a member of the society, and he has to live by the same precepts, the same customs, the same rules as everybody else. Because if we do not live in accordance with our rules, if everybody does whatever comes to their mind, whatever they want, then we will have a struggle, a war of all against all, a struggle, a fight of all against all, and then this will be the undoing of civilization. So Achilles, for his hubris, has to be punished. And ultimately, he dies thanks to some divine intervention. The details don't really matter. What matters now is that Achilles, being an archetype, is not just some fictional character that belongs to an ancient work of art. Achilles is as modern as ever. It is as relevant as ever. We can see that kind of person out there. And we see that kind of person in the form of an influencer, in the form of the person who has a platform and talks to millions of people, to millions of men in this case, and who is telling his audience that, hey, you should be more manly, you should have higher testosterone levels, you shouldn't be cowards, you shouldn't be this, you shouldn't be that. And this kind of influencer tries to emphasize the strength and the so-called testosterone levels that we men need to have. So we can imagine Achilles, when he is in that power trip of his, in that tour de force across the battlefield, we can imagine him pounding his chest and telling everybody, hey, look how strong I am simply the best. And I will beat you all, just because I can. he has no respect. He has no sense that he is just one among many. And no matter how talented you are, no matter how successful you are, you still are one among many. And in that regard, you are not special. And if you think you are special, the gods will intervene per the works of art. Achilles, contrary to modern day narratives of masculinity, of manhood, of let's be a man and that kind of thing, is not the only kind of man. Even if we only take the gender of man, even that one gender, there is still diversity inside of it. It's not just homogeneous. It's not just one type of man that can possibly exist. There are many types of man, including in the Trojan War itself. Not everybody is as self-obsessed and as arrogant as Achilles. There are others who are more considerate. And of course, in the modern day world, it's the same. One has an inclination towards sport. Another has an inclination towards music. A third has an inclination towards programming or whatever. They can all be men, but they are different. And that's totally okay. But if we go by the modern day narratives that are gaining currency in our world, the one is okay and the others are considered beta kind of males. And you have this kind of name calling. You are a beta, you are a coward, you are a weakling. And all this does is it encourages one group of men to bully other men and to create this toxic environment where both sides fight each other or both sides hate each other for no good reason. And both sides cannot simply accept the diversity that we have. So in the Trojan War, there are other types of man as well, such as Ulysses or Odysseus, or in modern Greek, Odysseus. Odysseus is an accomplished warrior in his own right. He may not be as strong or as dominant as Achilles, but he is no pushover either. He has been fighting that war for 10 years. He has seen a lot of things. Odysseus is the kind of a man who doesn't do everything by brute force. He has brawn, but he also has brains. He understands that sometimes you don't just power through. Sometimes you have to work around. Sometimes you have to use cunning. And so there is this story in the Odyssey, which is the epic where Odysseus is the protagonist. There is this story where Odysseus and his crew are on an island. And this island is the domain of a one-eyed giant called a cyclops. Now, of course, this is symbolism and it has mnemonic value because it impresses you, a one-eyed giant. You never forget that. So this one-eyed giant wants to eat the men. He doesn't have any friendly intention. If Odysseus was to listen to the advice of modern day influencers, he would be like, hey, I am the man around here. I challenge you to one-on-one combat, mortal combat here and now. You and me. So that he doesn't appear as a coward, as a weakling, as a beta male, and so on and so forth. But that would be foolishness of the highest order, because the Cyclops would simply obliterate Odysseus with one hit. There is no question about that. Instead, Odysseus understood that sometimes you circumvent the obstacles, that sometimes you have to do things differently. You can use force, but you can also use other means. So what he did was to feign weakness, to feign ignorance, and to devise this scheme to be more strategic in his actions. This scheme where he would wait for the Cyclops to lower his defenses to get into a more complacent mode. And when that would happen, he would strike and then make his escape, which is what ultimately happens. And so what Odysseus is showing us here is that it's not all about strength. Of course, there is nothing wrong with being strong. There is no problem with that. The problem is when we try to create a monoculture among men. When we see something that is diverse and we say, oh no, this diversity, this natural diversity is bad, it's wrong. And we are judging it. Instead of trying to understand it, instead of trying to appreciate it, we come here with our biases, and we come here with our predisposition and with our prejudices. And we are like, oh no, this is bad. You are all wrong, and I am right. And I think this kind of attitude is problematic. Because even when there are some elements of good advice in it, such as to exercise, yes, I think that's good advice. I don't think it's bad if you go to the gym or if you exercise outdoors or whatever. I don't think there is anything wrong with that. But if you make that the be-all and all of manhood, there starts the problem. Because now you are intolerant. Now you do not tolerate and you do not accept the fact that there are other types of activities as well, other types of man. The reason we have this debate about masculinity, the reason these influencers exist nowadays, is because, of course, we have debates about gender in general and debates about identity and individuality in general. So, of course, it is natural that if other genders try to identify themselves, that men will try to do the same. So, that fact in itself, I don't think it is a problem. I think it is problematic when it becomes intolerant inwardly. Forget about outwardly. That is, of course, a problem. But even inwardly, towards other men. Because it creates a culture of toxicity. It creates a culture of foolishness, fundamentally. Of you seeing somebody and judging them without knowing what they have gone through, without knowing what they have experienced. You just see a book and you judge it by its cover. And if it's tattered, you say this is a bad book, even if it is the epics of Homer or something great, something classic along those lines. Instead, we have this idea that unless you are showing certain specific traits, that you are not really a man and basically you are worthless. And everything is to be blamed on your worthlessness. And the problem with this is that even men who don't really subscribe to that worldview are affected by it. They are affected by it indirectly because they will be in the presence of other men who are bullying them. Or maybe they themselves will have this kind of doubt that, hey, maybe that person is right. Maybe the influencer is right after all. And maybe I am just a failure of a man. Maybe I am just a man manqué, a man who is incomplete in some way. And how worthless am I? And so the person will now, after internalizing this narrative, will now uh, not appreciate their own talents, not try to share those with the world. Imagine a poet or a musician who may be a sensitive kind of spirit. Imagine this person being bullied into submission for not being a manly man, so called. And then we don't get to enjoy the art that this person can produce. How sad our world would be if we didn't have music, for example, if we didn't have that option, because we bullied all the musicians into oblivion for not being of a high testosterone level or whatever kind of narrative we have. Let me tell you about some personal experiences. Starting from my earlier years, my teenage and early adult years. As you may know, I used to play football. I did it in a semi-professional capacity. And this means that I was playing competitively. And in anything that is competitive, of course, there is a good chance that you will find Achilles, that you will find the kind of person who really thinks that they are the best of the best, and that entitles them to be a bully around everybody. And you may have variations of that, where you will have others who will try to mimic the Achilles archetype, who are not as accomplished, who are not as talented, but who try to be bullies regardless. So there was this case, and there are many cases like it, it's not an isolated incident, where some guy who got the idea that alpha male is the right way to be, the right way to attract girls or whatever. And this guy was trying to make his voice sound deeper. And so so he fancied a girl, and whenever that girl would be in the vicinity, he would talk to us in a deeper voice and would be like, "Hey guys." And he would also insult us as, his classmates or fellow football players or friends or whatever. And he would insult us, and so as to make it sound as if he's, our boss or just capable of toying with us. And he would be like, "Hey guys," and the insult, "Hey, and I suggest that we go for some coffee this evening after school," and stuff like that. And then his goal was to impress the girl. And we would all call him out. We would all say that this is foolishness, that this is silly. Why are you doing that? Back then, I didn't know as much as I do now. I hadn't thought those issues through. But it always struck me as odd to do that sort of thing. I now know that if you are pretentious in that way, you will attract the kind of person who falls for it, the kind of person who is gullible enough to believe that this is actually you. But then that is a trap for yourself as well, because you will have to keep that act for as long as you are with this girl, for as long as you are in that relationship. And what if that relationship is a long-term relationship? At which point do you say, "Hey, honey, this is my real voice. It's not actually that deep. It's not actually that deep, This is who I actually am." At what point do you do that? And won't that be inconsiderate? Won't that be stupid? I had this case when I was I used to work as a bartender, and I did that for many years. And there would be a case where some guy would enjoy drinking a cocktail. And the cocktail would be, I'm not sure right now, but I think it would be tequila sunrise. So it would be tequila with orange juice and some syrup. It doesn't really matter what it is. The point is that it is kind of sweet. kind of sweet, kind of a refreshing drink. I don't drink alcohol, by the way. I used to, but I have long since quit. Anyhow, so this guy would drink that. And then when there would be girls around, he would switch to drinking vodka, no ice. And the idea was that he was trying to show that he is not a coward, a beta male, or whatever kind of silly description. So he could tolerate what the manly men are drinking, which is vodka straight. No juice, no syrup, none of that. That is for girls, according to that mindset, right? And at the time when I saw that, I told him that you are not impressing anybody. Nobody cares if you have the liver or whatever to tolerate vodka straight. So what? Drink it because you enjoy it. That's totally fine. But don't do it to impress some girl at the bar. If the girl likes you, it won't be for the vodka. And if it is for the vodka, you don't really want to be with that girl anyway. Because she won't appreciate you for your other qualities. And if you don't want to show those other qualities, that's your problem. This monoculture, this idea that we all need to be a certain kind of man, that we cannot allow ourselves to express our individuality, that we cannot allow ourselves to be different, is harmful. It is harmful because it puts us now in this game where we have to be acting the whole time. It's a role-playing game. And now, because everybody is observing me, the girls at the bar or the girl that is in my vicinity and I need to deepen my voice or whatever, because others are around, there are witnesses, now I have to play the role of man and talk about my high testosterone levels and how manly I am and that sort of nonsense. It's totally okay if you actually are like that. It's totally okay if you are strong, if you have those fabled testosterone levels, that's fine. What is not okay is to reduce manhood to that and to say that unless you are that, you are nothing. This toxic culture, of course, is not limited to just these kind of interpersonal affairs. It also goes to other things such as hierarchies and organizational structures, where you will have work ethics that are unhealthy, that are unsustainable. Work practices, rather, not work ethics. Work practices that are unsustainable. So you have this idea that real men do what they must and they never complain, you know? And there is also this theme like real men do not cry. And of course, notice this theme of the real men. So if you do cry, you are not real and you are something else, whatever. Or if you do say that, hey, I actually don't agree with this. I actually don't believe this is true. Why should I be doing it? Just because I am a man, what does that mean? I am not mindless. Why should I be carrying out my duty, so-called, unquestionably? Why should I not be thinking that maybe this is not right? Maybe this is not just. And having the conscientious objection to injustice. Why is that not manly? And of course, I personally don't think that that is manly. I think that is just what you can do regardless of gender. But now I am limiting it to masculinity. So they will tell you that men have to tolerate everything. They have to just do what they must and not what they feel like. And if they do what they feel, then they are not real men. And that is where the problems start. Because now we don't have discipline or whatever. And that is not discipline. That is not discipline at all. Let me tell you what discipline really is. It is about developing rules and following those rules yourself without external intervention. When you are following orders, that is obedience. That is not discipline. It may have the same appearance as discipline because it is regimented and you are doing things with a certain structure. That's fine. But it is obedience. It is conformity with the established power structure. And I'm not saying that this is necessarily wrong. I'm just trying to differentiate it from discipline, which is not about doing what your duty, so called, is. It is about living in accordance with your own rules and saying that these are my rules and I will respect them. And I recognize that with autonomy, with freedom, comes great responsibility. Freedom is not about the power to do whatever you want and not deal with the consequences. No. Freedom is about recognizing that there are constraints, that there are trade-offs, but choosing which set of trade-offs you will pick and living in accordance with that and dealing with the consequences. That is what discipline is about. And I don't think there is anything particularly manly about that. I think every person can have discipline. But again, I am talking about this more limited theme of masculinity, where they will tell you, no, you should just be doing what your duty is and not what you feel like. So why should we not be doing what we feel like? Why is that inherently contradicting to the masculine, the manly experience? Men do not feel, they are not human? What's the deal with that? Of course, there are moments, there are specific times and situations where, yes, there is some greater call, like in the case of war, and you have to defend the country, and you have to defend your family or whatever, where you have to act. And maybe you don't do it because you are bellicose. You don't do it because you actually want to fight, but because you have to fight. And I understand that, but those are not the norm. Those are not your everyday affairs. Let's think about more banal issues, such as what happens in the workplace. Why should you tolerate the abuse from your boss, your inconsiderate boss who will pretend to be your friend only to exploit you further, to exploit your sense of camaraderie? Why should you have a sense of duty towards that? Why should you have a sense of duty towards some faceless corporation that doesn't care about you at all, that considers you disposable, replaceable? Why would you have a sense of patriotism, as it were, towards your employer? Employer in this faceless, in this abusive sense. I'm not saying that all employers are like that. But when they are like that, and this is exactly the point of being nuanced, of being considerate, of understanding the factors at play, the prevailing conditions, and of thinking for yourself. Sometimes you have to do the right thing. You have to do what you must, yes. But sometimes you must also follow your heart. You must trust in your intuitions. And if something is not right, you must act on the basis of you not feeling right with that. Let me tell you, since we are on the topic of, I have one of my dogs here, the other was here as well, but he wants some attention. So let me tell you, since we were on the topic of myths and the importance of symbols and art and the gods, let's consider a little bit the symbol of the goddess of wisdom, the Greek goddess of wisdom, Athena in English, Athena in Greek. Athena is represented as a warrior. She wears a helmet and carries a shield and holds a spear. This is the outfit of a Greek heavy infantry. She is the kind of infantry that would fight in a phalanx of shields. A phalanx is a formation where one shield is next to the other. You can think of it kind of how rugby is played, where the players will form a wall and they are pushing to get the control of the ball. So you have to think of the phalanx of shields as exactly that kind of thing, where all of us together forming the phalanx are trying to push the opponents away. So Athena is a heavy infantry. It's that kind of warrior. But she is the goddess of wisdom. Why? Wouldn't we expect the goddess of wisdom to be some kind of a scholar, perhaps? A librarian, maybe? An academic? Maybe some kind of miraculous healer? Or something along those lines? Something more peace-loving sort of thing, right? Something more pacifist. Why is the goddess of wisdom, of all gods, why is she a warrior? The reason, I think, is because it describes, this archetype describes exactly what I mentioned earlier, that sometimes you have to do what you have to do, but sometimes you have to trust yourself and to listen to your feelings and to go with that. Because what the goddess of wisdom and what wisdom is all about is exactly that one size does not fit all. That I have rules in place, or there are rules in place, but I don't just follow those rules mindlessly. I follow them for as long as they make sense. And I understand that there will be cases, exceptions, yes, but there will be cases where the application of those rules has to be suspended. And I know that I will do that. I will not follow my rules or their rules in those exceptional, in those special cases. Put in the image of Athena, in the image of the warrior goddess, sometimes you have to fight. And when you have to fight, you will do it in earnest. But this doesn't mean that you will always be in a fighting mood. And this is why I think Athena is also represented as a female goddess, contrary to the god of war, Ares, who is a male god. Because it's exactly to show that it's not all about strength. It's not all about sheer brawn. There are other qualities to it as well. And you have to be more subtle, you have to be more nuanced, you have to be more considerate. The gods, of course, are representations. As with the work of Homer, the gods are representations. They are patterns in the world that we give them a name, and we give them a character, and we give them symbols. And we fasten those significations around those symbols. And we do that because it's easier for us to communicate. It's easier for us to remember profound insights, important teachings. It's not that there is actually a warrior goddess, a goddess carrying a shield somewhere on Mount Olympus. It's not that. Of course not. You can go there and verify for yourself. There is no such thing. But there is. In the human experience, there is Athena always there, where you don't have to fight. You don't have to use force, normally. But sometimes, you have to stand your ground, and you have to fight for something. And when you have to fight, of course, you must be prepared. This is the idea. And this is the kind of nuance, this is the kind of subtlety that we are missing in the modern debates, I think. Of course, the modern narratives about masculinity, but more generally about gender, about identity, and so on, where we tend to oscillate between the extremes, rather, where we try to, or rather not try to, where we tend to stereotype people, and we are like, oh, all men are like this, or women are like this, or other people are like that, and so on and so forth. And we call people names, and we consider them the source of all evil. Like, why is society so bad? Oh, it's because of that single thing, whatever that may be, depending on who you are talking with. And we have this idea that we are at the decline of civilization because now, in the case of the masculine narrative, men are not men anymore. And this is not historical, of course. This is not what is actually happening. But it is nevertheless one of the talking points. Like, we have inequality, it's because men are not real men. We have corruption in the government, it's because men are not real men. We have all those issues with an ineffective political compact, with a constitution that does not work, with institutions that are not inclusive, and so on. Oh, it's because men are not a real men. And I think when we think in those terms and we try to play that game, we inevitably lose any sense of nuance in our discussions. And we observe this also in the political debates that are unfolding and we are witnessing, where one extremist will say the most extreme thing you can imagine, and all that does is that it galvanizes the other extremist to say the other most extreme thing, and any kind of voice of reason is lost in the cacophony. So what I want, what I think we should be thinking about is not to judge, but to understand. I observe somebody who does something different. I won't say, oh, how inadequate you are. No. I will rather think, what is it that I do not know, and now I am learning in the form of this phenomenon? What is it now that the world is showing me? This is a possibility that I had not experienced before. A possibility in the cosmos, I mean, in the broader sense. Oh, this also happens. And I want to learn more about it. Why does it happen? What are the implications for it? And so on. Judging is easy. You just have a set of knowns and basically everything else is bad. But judging is fundamentally a mindset of limiting yourself to the realm of the known. It is not a mindset of exploration. It is not a mindset of being dubitative, of being inquisitive, of being skeptical. It is a mindset of, these are the rules, this is how things are, end of story. We know everything. How come you know everything? How come you know everything? You don't. You really don't. And if you think you do, you are just fooling yourself. And that is hubris. And maybe there are no gods that will intervene to kill you the way they killed Achilles. But if we collectively follow that line of thinking, we are running the risk of harming ourselves. Where will science come from if we know everything, for example? Where will new ideas come from, such as new works of art, if we don't allow them to come to fruition? How boring our life will be if we keep repeating the same things over and over because we cannot tolerate the possibility of discovering something that challenges our sense of truth. To challenge our sense of truth. This is fundamentally what nuance is about. This is fundamentally what it means to consider diversity, what it means to be tolerant. There are people who will tell you, oh, I am tolerant. I am totally tolerant. Simply because I don't kill you. But that's not real tolerance. Tolerance is when you internalize the fact of diversity. And when you internalize the implication that there are more things to be learned, more things to be discovered, and to be prepared for that. And to say that I withhold final judgment. I have my beliefs. I have to have some beliefs because I cannot operate on the basis of full knowledge. I am not omniscient. In the here and now, I have to do something. I have to act, and I am always acting on the basis of incomplete information. But I understand that maybe future experiences, new events, new states of affairs will make my relative ignorance apparent to me. And thus, I withhold judgment. So if I am proven wrong, I am happy to reconsider. But to do that, I must start from the position that I accept that I don't know everything. And I accept thus that there are states of affairs, there are phenomena yet to be experienced, yet to be witnessed, yet to be studied. This is what I want, at least. This is what I want, the ability, the freedom, the luxury, if you will, to consider, to reconsider, to withhold judgment, and to understand that even though I believe certain things, these things may be wrong. And if I ever learn that I was wrong, I will be happy. I will be very happy because I will be freeing myself from the shackles of ignorance, of that relative ignorance. So on the topic of masculinity, I don't want to be dealing with gatekeepers. Oh, this is what masculinity is and nothing else. Why? Why? Where do you see that in the world? The world is full of possibilities. It's full of permutations and combinations that you cannot even fathom. Why would this one thing be an exception? That's all for today, folks. Thank you very much for your attention. Take care and goodbye for now.